Upfront and Outspoken with Bob Williams. If you love the Constitution,
man is not free unless government is limited.
If you love freedom,
as government expands, liberty contracts.
If you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe America is still the greatest nation on earth, then get ready for an experience you'll never forget. This is Upfront and Outspoken. Here's your host, Bob Williams.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
And welcome back. This is, of course, Upfront Outspoken. I'm your host, Bob Williams, with you here on this TGIF Friday, halfway through the first month of 2015. Joining me via Skype, two very important guests. They have their own shows, which air right here on the Starcom Radio Network. Of course, everyone knows Friday, I always bring on Jonathan Wolfman. He is the host of Passionate Justice that you hear here every Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time. And our latest addition to our family, Fred Brauer, who is the host of the Fred Brauer Report, which will be airing here in 2 weeks on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Welcome to the program, guys. Glad to have you.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody out there.
Now today, the reason why I brought both of you on, because you both have completely different perspectives on several things. First off, I want to talk about is our listeners heard earlier on Democracy Now! About a sergeant and Eric Hickman who wrote a book in reference to what goes on at Gitmo that we are unaware of. And I'm talking pretty much about three suspected terrorists, and I want to use it at that because it was never completely proven, but three suspected terrorists who the military said committed suicide. Well, Hickman, on the other side, is saying that they were indeed murdered. Now, my question to both of you, and I don't care who's the first one to answer this, is did we really need to know this, or is this just a disgruntled soldier?
Well, it's probably not very easy to know if it was just a disgruntled soldier, whether he was, exaggerating the situation that simply got out of hand, or whether our officers were, responding to an attack of some kind. Very difficult to know. On the free speech issue, there may well be rules, just like when you leave the CIA, you're not allowed to write a book about operations. I think it's like until 7 years out, and you still have to have the book vetted and you sign papers like that. I'm not sure if the U.S. military runs by those rules, and if it does, he should have followed the rules, the writer. And I'm with you, Bob, as far as free speech is concerned. But if you sign a document, you need to live up to the document.
Fred, your response. Did we lose you there, Fred? Or are you still with us?
No, I'm here.
Okay, now I'm going to pose that same question to you. Was Hickman right in what he did, or was he wrong? I mean, should we have known that there is an opposing viewpoint to what goes on at Gitmo, or is it just something that we're talking possibly a disgruntled soldier here?
I would say wrong. And the reason I say that is, wow, we have like backlog here.
Yeah, so you must have your you must have the speakers up.
Let me turn this down.
Okay, but what I'm trying to get at here is, we have heard, when when what the hell's his name now? Bin Laden. When Bin Laden was killed, everybody was, finally. And then we get a book out there from a member of the SEAL team that actually went in and killed Bin Laden. And this guy is, potentially going to be brought up in court on some federal charges relating to this. Granted, we have a right to know certain information, but I'm beginning to wonder if Hickman isn't just a disgruntled soldier for one reason or another, because if you look at the dedication to this, it is the father of terrorism.
Yeah, I think it's a very slippery slope he's on. I think it's dangerous. It's not a good idea. Listen, you look at radical Islam and their tactics and, the rules that they play by, which are none. And then you have a government that is charged with protecting the free world that has this rule book to play by. And then here comes Jonathan Hickman undermining Gitmo, undermining the CIA. It's not a good idea. Does he have the right to do so? I mean, according to the First Amendment, yeah, probably. I mean, he can publish his book, he can speak to whoever he wants, but it's very dangerous. It's a very bad idea. And as a former soldier, I would wonder if he would even be in some kind of legal trouble with the military for doing so.
I would want to know again whether or not guys who work at installations like our one in the eastern edge of Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, if this guy is in fact violating a promise that he signed, I wouldn't be surprised. And the other question, I think the more important question even, although really nothing's more important than debating issues of free speech, but just as important, I think, is does Hickman bring to bear actual evidence that he is somehow privileged to know that would suggest that these three men died as a result of murder? Murder is a hell of a charge.
Well, I agree.
It has to be substantiated.
Yeah. The thing is in the report that they did on Democracy Now! When they had Hickman himself on there, he never once, if you listen to it, you can correct me if I'm mistaken here. He never once specifically said this document or this occurred. It's more like I saw this, I heard this. He's basing a lot of his book on unfounded allegations, and granted, we're all in some ways, in one way or another, we're protected under the First Amendment for free speech, but it's making me wonder if what he is doing indeed crosses the line that is going to affect not only how we acquire intel, but is going to put more American lives at danger and in the hands of terrorists. It's going to make me kind of wonder this, because we've heard this stuff over and over again, and then there's been some reaction from the other side.
It almost sounds to me, Bob, as if what we're saying is this guy's written a book based on not a hell of a lot more than rumor. Is that what we're really saying? And if that's true, I can understand why a publisher would go for a quick buck. Ooh, the guy's at Gitmo. Ooh, he's alleging murder. Ooh, that's really great. We'll sell 1 million copies. Okay, I get that financial motive, but come on, there's got to be editors out there. There's got to be. You have editors. I have editors when I write books. My God, they insist. Good editors insist on on reasonable attestation, that is, to show that something is not second, third, fourth hand information. Something you're doing is just a little bit above the level of rumor.
You have a comment on that, Fred?
No, I think John struck on a really good point. The left would snatch up on that. The far left in this country would snatch up on that book very quickly, because that was one of the cornerstones of Obama's campaign. The people that voted for him, that he was going to close Gitmo.
Yeah, and this book,
And John's right. That's an instant moneymaker. Boom. Yeah,
Well,
he'll make a quick million on that, selling that
I
book.
consider myself on the left, but I also consider myself understanding why free speech is important. Free speech is important because it allows us to get at the truth. Rumor, if it's truth, rumor is only truth by dumb luck. If this guy is doing his due diligence like a good, solid reporter, like the kind, whether you're left, right, or center, the kind we'd all respect, well, okay. But if his book doesn't seem to be saying, well, I have these guys swearing to XYZ, then that's not more than rumor, and that's not journalism.
well, I agree. I mean, the thing is, every journalist or every first-hand account of what is going on, you need to have it substantiated. You cannot just go out and make an allegation. Well, if that's the case, you're writing a fictional book, and it's no better than no more deserving, especially in a situation like this. It's no more deserving than to show up in the National Enquirer. And
That's right.
Everyone knows I am a very, very strong advocate of the First Amendment. In particular, our right of free speech and the right of freedom of the press. And everyone knows I am a strong advocate about it. And any kind of legislation or any kind of talk that's going to hinder that, I go up in arms about it. I mean, I just go ballistic. But it's guys like this. It's guys like Hickman who proclaim, it's my right. It's my right to say these allegations. But, if you listen to the Al Jazeera report earlier, that right only goes so far as you do not impede or endanger the lives of others. You can't go into a packed theater and say fire when there isn't any. That's a violation of the person, of the law, and you're going to get punished. I'm wondering if by this book of allegations, did he cross that line?
Yes.
I'd have to read the thing, and I may well. It just seems to me that if he hasn't done due diligence, then your reaction to the book should not have anything to do with whether you're on the left, whether you're on the right. It should have to do with what proper journalism is about.
I know you were going to say something, Fred. Go ahead.
I'll let John finish.
Oh, no, go right ahead, Fred.
Yeah, no, he did cross that line, and the reason I think I'd say so is too much of the American public doesn't require proof. Too much of the American public will form a concrete opinion based on allegation. That's where responsible journalism comes in, like John was saying. With books are published all the time without factual basis, but you'll have a huge portion of the American public that will base their decisions on that. And that's where irresponsible journalism becomes dangerous.
That's right. Ed Till yesterday, our colleague Ed Till, was talking about, and it's a different content, but it's the same idea. Ed Till was talking yesterday at one point about an interview with one of the women who was accusing Bill Cosby of terrible, terrible acts. And is it possible that he did those things? Sure, but again, you need to really demand more than rumor, more than unsubstantiated allegation. And what incensed Ed, and he was right to be angry, was that he was watching CNN, and there were two interviewers on CNN, and the interviewer finished with the woman who gave no substantiation, and she says, oh, and the guy says, well, I believe her, how about you? And the other interviewer from CNN says, yeah, I believe her too, and now let's turn to Syria. If that's what CNN is doing, without, a little bit of hardball here, if that's what CNN is doing, that's irresponsible journalism, and it feeds exactly right into what you're saying, that is too many Americans are happy to see talking heads on TV as being so authoritative that they're missing the fact that they didn't question the lady.
The one thing that I'm kind of glad you brought that up, Jonathan, is that correct me if I'm mistaken, or did we suddenly become a communistic state here? We are innocent until proven guilty by a jury of our peers. So, Bill Cosby, in the instance that you're referring to, Bill Cosby is innocent until proven otherwise. I mean, come on, the guy's 77 years old. Granted, he probably had sex with, dozens of women throughout his career. I mean, come on, give me a break here. He was a celebrity. People wanted to, a lot of these young ladies thought, well, maybe if I do something, I can get a show, or I get a part on a show. These are all strictly allegations. Nothing's been proven, and it's making me wonder.
Indeed,
what
no
happened?
Charges have ever even been brought to court.
Well,
No.
well, there's one woman now who's going to the LAPD and saying, "Hey, this happened in 2008." We'll see. We'll see what turns up out of that. But right now, as it stands at this point in time, these are only unproven allegations because no charges have ever been filed, and we have to hold ourselves to the foundation that we are all innocent until proven guilty. So, it's making me wonder if, places like CNN, and you hear it on Good Morning America, and you hear it all elsewhere, where they bring these individuals in who are accusing Bill Cosby of this. Are they looking for some sensationalism? Are they looking for the
Money.
15? Yeah, money.
Bingo.
Their 15 minutes of fame. Let's just pile on to something that may not even exist after all, because nothing's proven.
Well, and what really gets me again is not whether or not he's guilty. Either he did it or he didn't. We'll, as you say, Bob, we'll figure it out. I mean, it'll come out. In the LA thing, it probably will. And yet, what I think is really troubling is, as Ed pointed out yesterday on his show, here's the CNN anchors just saying, yeah, well, I believe it. Okay, now let's turn to other news. I mean, and that says to Americans, you don't have to ask for proof of anything.
And so the question is, are these guys, it goes back to what I've been proving, and I can't say this enough. It goes back to what I've been saying all along, is that today's news, today's take on the news is not news anymore. It's all under the entertainment department of these mainstream media, mega corporations. They're not looking at it as news. Let's find something that's going to have a high impact. I don't care if it's true. I don't care if it's false. Something that's going to be entertaining. We don't want people to start critical thinking. But yet, it diminishes the true journalists who need to get to the story, who need to get the heart of issues, right side, left side, in the middle. We need to get both sides of the story to file a proper report. It's infuriating to me that we have focused on entertainment.
I think that's part of it. And I think that going back to that CNN thing, and I know I'm hitting hard on that, but you would think that if news and analysis were their real motive, they would never have said, oh yeah, well, I believe it. How about you, Bob? Yeah, let's go on to Syria now. They would have, if their motive really had been to find out truth, my God, that's what their motive's supposed to be, then they would have never handled it that way.
Oh, I agree. Once again, I want to, introduce everybody here in case you just tuned in with me today, especially today, because of a lot of events that's going on. We're going to be covering more here. Is Jonathan Wolfman, host of Passionate Justice, heard right here at 2 p.m. Saturday, and Fred Brauer, host of the Fred Brauer Report, which will be coming, premiering here on the Starcom Radio Network in 2 weeks on Tuesday at 4 p.m. And once again, I want to thank these guys for taking time out of their day to join me. Now, I want to go back to the events of just last week with Charlie Hebdo. Yeah, I'll get it right. Hebdo. Thank you, Charlie Hebdo. Okay, and I'm going to put it this way: and the terrorist attack on a satirical magazine. 12 people are killed there. 7 more are killed in other attacks. Is the attack that occurred at Charlie saying to reporters, guess what, guys? You got a target on your back, and we're going to get you.
I think that's a target. As far as ISIS or radical Islam is concerned, there's a target on anyone who speaks against them. It just so happens.
I think that's
just
right.
So happens that Charlie Hebdo did it publicly. I mean, look at look as far back as Benghazi. I mean, Hillary Clinton even supported the notion that radical Islam freaked out over a video.
Exactly. Well, I want to interject one thing here. Okay, it was brought to my attention by another host here on the Starcom Radio Network yesterday that Joe Walsh. Now, I don't know if any of you guys know who he is. He's a former U.S. congressman from the 8th District of Illinois.
Yeah, okay. I know of him.
Okay. Well, on a couple days ago, he came out with a comment that the next time a terrorist act like what happened in Paris occurs, that the heads of MSNBC, CNN, all the major news networks deserve to be killed by these Islamic organizations because, and this is what he said, this was his rationale, which I think is way off the long here, is they would not air these cartoons that were in Charlie Hebdo. It is, to me, it is people like that, like Joe Walsh, that are, throwing us out to the wolves, throwing every real journalist or even a satirical magazine to the wolves, and offering ISIS and all these terroristic organizations potential targets. What do you think about not only his statement, but its potential after effects? And I want to start with you, Fred, about that, because I know you are very outspoken.
Is he still in office?
No, he left office in 2012. He has, believe it or not, this idiot has his own talk show.
Oh God! No, he's a nutball. I'm speechless, to tell you the truth.
Okay, while you gather your thoughts, Jonathan, you're impressed.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah,
Besides,
Walsh-
that's just insanity. I mean, that's
Walsh is. Look, we have nutballs on the left. We have nutballs on the right. He just happens to be one of those nutballs on the right. He has said far more outrageous and frankly stupid things than that, Joe Walsh. And there's a reason that even in congressional elections dominated by right-leaning Republicans, this guy lost. I mean, he is that outrageous.
And the thing is Walsh, he is a member of, quote unquote, the Tea Party. And I look back at his track record, and he was only suspended for 1 day because he made racial comments about African Americans. So they suspended him for 1 day. With what he has said, and basically throwing to the wolves, journalists, I don't think he should get a 1 day suspension. I don't think he should get a 5 day suspension. I think they ought to just pull the plug and say, hey, Walsh, you're done. You can't do this.
No, it's
in my opinion, a guy like that, I don't care if he's on the right, Tea Party, whatever. That a guy like that is on the same level as guys like Al Sharpton or Louis Farrakhan, except on the other side.
Now, Jonathan, you're very
I
quiet
certainly
there.
wouldn't lump. I mean, we don't have to debate this, but I certainly wouldn't lump Mr. Sharpton with Mr. Farrakhan. I don't think one is a nut, and I think the other is a nut. But and Sharpton has never called for the murder of anybody, and that's what Walsh is calling for. You don't call for murders of individuals and then expect to be taken seriously.
I agree on some respects, but also the fact what I don't like about the quote unquote Reverend Al Sharpton is he is probably, in my opinion, the most two-faced person I have ever seen. 1 minute he's out there cutting down law enforcement and all this, and the next minute we see him sitting next to President Obama in supposed support of law and order. I said.
Well, if I can throw a word out about Al Sharpton, no, John's right. He has never literally called for murder. No, actually, Al Sharpton is much slimier than that. We mentioned about a month ago the 10 or 15 cities he posted online to protest. He advocates quietly for violence, which potentially can get people killed.
Oh, yeah.
We had, and I'm not saying Al Sharpton's responsible for this, but you got to consider the couple of cops that were literally assassinated in New York not long ago. When Al Sharpton creates this unrest that can very easily escalate to people getting killed.
And that's kind of exactly what Walsh is doing here by his comments.
Exactly.
And it's I myself, I said this on my show many times. The worst person to have sitting next to you, especially if I was a and I am, don't get me wrong here, I hate the mafia, I hate what they do. The last person I would want sitting next to me when I'm talking about crimes or going after the mafia legally would be John Gotti. Come on. That's the same thing that President Obama did by having Reverend Sharpton sitting right next to him. Here you got a guy that's anti-cop, anti-society in a lot of respects, and he's sitting next to me when I'm talking pro the police department, pro law enforcement. That's a bad image. But the question, it's always going to come down, to how we as journalists are going to react now to comments by people like Walsh. How are we as journalists going to be able to do our job knowing he helped he helped, and I'm going to put it that way. He's helping these radical terrorists, by putting this bullseye on us. What do we do? What do we do to say, hey, you can't do this?
Well, I think Fred got it right. You don't give that guy any kind. If you're a responsible member of the media, no responsible company, no responsible media outlet gives that guy a continual voice.
No.
Yeah, but the thing is, as well as I do, with what he said, it's going to rouse people. It's going to, if he was looking to create a firestorm, he did, okay? And we know there are going to be news outlets that are going to take this and run with it, and this guy is probably going to get as famous as, whoever is currently the star of Hollywood. It's this guy here, he's basically, I'm going to target journalists, I'm going to target these guys, but guess what? I'm going to get richer because of what I said.
Yeah, I think people, I hope you're wrong, let me put it that way, because I do think that even within the Republican landscape, he's a pariah. He's on the outs. I mean, this is a guy who was running against an Iraq war veteran, a woman who came home without at least one leg, maybe two, and made fun of her physical disability that she got fighting for the United States of America. I mean, everybody knows that Walsh is nuts. And yes, what he says is incendiary. You're right that, Bob, that it is potentially a danger. But I'm just hoping, let me put it that way, I can't swear to it, but I am hoping that there are enough people out there who look at this guy and say, oh, just forget it.
The thing, a lot of people, what was it, about a year and a half ago, when Rush Limbaugh got on the air and condemned, I forget what her name is, because she had requested, that the government help her pay for birth control, and we all know that, if you're a member of the healthcare community, birth control can also help individuals who have, female who might have had ovarian cancer. I mean, it helps them. It's not just a matter of, birth control where I can go out and get laid. I don't have to worry about getting pregnant. But Limbaugh put it on the fact that she was going to be a paid prostitute. And a lot of people, as soon as that came up, they pulled their advertising away from Limbaugh. But guess what? He's still on the radio. He's even garnered more advertisers than he had before. Is this what the public wants and not the true meaning of real journalism? Is the public so fascinated by, this stupid crap that's coming out of some of these talk show hosts?
I don't think anybody expects anything remotely like real journalism from talk show hosts like him. The young woman's name was Sandra Fluke, and what she was doing was testifying before Congress that the health care law ought not be stripped of its ability to pay for poor people's women's health care. And he went after it, twisted it as he usually does, and said that, in fact, what she was lobbying for before Congress was the right to be a whore on the government's dime. And he said it again and again and again and again to a 22-year-old woman. And it was untoward, it was over the top, it was unnecessary. If you want to express reasons why you think Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is a bad idea for America, fine, go do it. But don't do it by exploiting young women who are simply lobbying in Congress for, just like it would be our right to lobby against it. Don't do that. That's just foolish.
You have a comment on that, Fred?
I didn't hear Rush say that. My only problem with that portion of the Affordable Health Care Act, I disagree with any provision that would provide for taxpayer-funded birth control. That should be a personal expense. Now, healthcare, that's a different issue, but birth control is, it's a difference between needs and wants. You need healthcare, you need mammograms, you need cancer screenings. You don't need birth control. That's something you want.
But
that is a personal responsibility.
Fred, I would easily make the argument that, in fact, we as a culture, if we're going to do what we need to do economically, have to be in the business of helping families keep families at a reasonable number of children.
Okay, now, guys, we're kind of drifting from the subject here, a little bit, and I apologize to reel you in, so to speak.
You open a can of worms there.
Yeah, we can talk
no
about
problem.
we can always debate this another time, which I hope we do. But the what I'm trying to get at here is, when do journalists, or alleged journalists, shall we say, when is it considered they crossed a line? When is it that we no longer are journalists but entertainers? I guess there's this fine line that mainstream has, that we don't want to give the people this bitter pill. But yet, guess what? There are bitter pills out there, and there are assholes that are, talk show hosts like Limbaugh and Walsh, and I can probably name several others. When is it that people are going to realize there are reputable talk show hosts out there that state what they say based on fact, other than innuendo or publicity gain?
I think one of the reasons you're saying that, Bob, is because you and I, and probably Fred too, remembers a time when there was a pretty clear line between news reporting and news commentary, that is commentary, opinion based on fact, and this entertainment world. Now the lines are so blurred. But you and I remember a time when those lines weren't blurred, and we, frankly, I hear you, and like I do, lament this blurring of the lines.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think...
Go ahead, Fred.
Well, we remember a time when the lines weren't blurred because it was a time when you had a black and white TV in your living room and it only had 3 channels. You didn't have internet, you didn't have video, you didn't have computer generated. The American public in the world is so inundated with sensationalist, instant entertainment, and they're barraged with it, that I think even a half-responsible journalist has to throw so much shock value into his delivery to get the American public's attention. That's very unfortunate, but there it is. It's hard to get a person's attention now. 30 years ago, it was much easier. You had a lot less choices. Like I said, you had a black and white TV in your living room with 3 channels.
Right. I agree with you, immensely on most of what you said. Please do not think that I do not. Granted, today you can go to YouTube, you can go to, Facebook or wherever, and you find all these sensationalized things, or you got, if you got cable TV, you got hundreds of channels, but I'm always, look back, at the reporters who were, when they reported, they were right there in the trenches. I mean, how many times did we see reporters right there in Vietnam reporting from the front lines? And they were looking at it from not just the standpoint of, well, the American soldiers killed X number of EC today, blah, blah, blah. But they also looked at it from the humanity side of what happened, some of our actions over there. It seems today what we focus on is getting sympathy for the actions. I mean, I've seen so many reports out here that, they're showing sympathy towards a group, but yet they fail to show that, guess what? This group is what initiated the action to begin with, but yet you're showing you're trying to get garner sympathy for them. Where did we go wrong?
Yeah, what you're saying is right, and that is because of what Fred said being true, and I think it is true. Because of its being true, the goal of most so-called news people today is to prick your emotion and not to give you information that you can then digest. And it's also sad because there's an assumption behind it that says that the average news consumer, you and me and all of our listeners, are dumb.
Sounds like George Carlin all over. Because he said something along those same lines. I'm aghast at how badly today's society would rather listen to some sensationalized story. They want to see, something like that, but yet they're not willing to accept the fact that there are times there are bitter pills out there. Now, Jonathan, you know this for a fact. When the attacks that that Hamas had been launching against Israel, what was the first thing that was being said? Oh, poor Palestine, poor this. Not realizing, hey guys, there is this other side. This country, Israel, is defending itself. It's taking appropriate action to defend themselves against a terrorist group. But yet we had poor Palestine, poor Palestinians.
Well, I mean, I think the fact is that there need to be some sympathy for the average Palestinian, but what was never said is that they're not really suffering because of Israel. They're suffering because of terrorists such as Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, who control them. And and the second part of it that you're implying, Bob, was that when Israel finally decided to say, okay, enough's enough, they had been dealing with thousands of rockets per month for how many months before they struck?
You got a comment to that, Fred?
The Middle East and Palestine and Israel it's such a quagmire, and they've never known peace for 1,000 years. But I stand with Israel. I mean, here you got this itty bitty country surrounded by enemies. I mean, personally, I think Netanyahu was a brilliant statesman, but I don't understand why so much of the American public takes an aggressive stance against Israel. It is pretty much the only free democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah, but my question was why did journalists, granted, and I am one that's pro-Israel. I'm not going to say I'm not. Israel is a very strong ally of ours in the Middle East. They're the only democratic society basically right there in the Middle East, proving, hey, democracy works. But, what really got to me was 20 minutes after the first rocket was launched against Hezbollah or Hamas or whoever fired it, even though they used a human shield, we're hearing, oh, poor Palestine, poor this, poor that. Not the fact that, hey, guess what, guys? These guys fired it from a hospital. These guys fired it from a school. These guys fired it from an apartment building. We're seeing all over mainstream media, and they're going after the angle of poor Hamas.
I think that the reason for that is because these entertainer news people know that the American public can be very easily swayed if you present an issue as, let's be on the side of the underdog. Let's be on the side, without analyzing it to say, well, wait a minute, maybe the average Palestinian is an underdog, but who's really oppressing them? That gets to a level of analysis that they know that the average listener doesn't want to hear, because they don't want to take the time to explain it right.
I think it's deeper than that.
Go ahead.
I think it's because I think the journalists that came out in support of Palestine in that situation, I think they serve Obama's underlying agenda. Obama's made it pretty clear, without saying so, that he's not a great supporter of Israel. He hasn't shown Israel the respect that any of our other presidents did. I think Obama is secretly a Muslim sympathizer.
It does make one wonder, and we've got about less than a little under 5 minutes here yet, guys, and I do want to get your impressions of, as a journalist, we have to walk that fine line, and everybody says, well, in journalism there is no such thing as fine line, but there is really. We need to be able to, bring both sides of a story to any issue. I don't care if it's what goes on in Israel, what goes on in Saudi Arabia, what happened in Paris, or what just recently happened in Belgium. But as real journalists, we have to walk that fine line. And are the journalists today saying, let's lean a little bit here because we've got the war machine that's supporting us, or do we lean this way because I'm pro this? Where do we say enough is enough and get back on that fine line? Wow. Why?
Well,
everybody kind of dropped off on me. Everybody kind of dropped off. And Jonathan, your opinion on that?
Yeah, I just think you have to be journalists and do it right. I honestly think there is a market out there in the listening and visual audiences for the good old-time journalism. I have to believe that. Otherwise, what are we, the three of us, in this business for?
Brad, your comments.
Yeah, I think we have to do exactly what we're doing right now, this morning, and grow the number of us. We have to challenge. We have to challenge guys like Piers Morgan on MSNBC, and we have to challenge. We have to challenge irresponsible journalists. We have to call them out on our own shows and say, "Well, wait a minute. This is not true. Here's this fact, and this fact, and this fact, and this fact." We have to back what we do with fact. Now, I know that sometimes that's really hard to find, but it is out there.
Yeah,
exactly. It takes a lot longer to dig it up on the internet, maybe, but it can be done.
Well, even so, I mean, if a real journalist is not going to side, in my opinion. And you know what they say about opinions. But in my opinion, a real journalist is not going to take the money from corporate America and then do a story that, is going to be, beefing them up, even though we know that, hey, guess what? Monsanto is doing this. A true journalist, if that guy, like Monsanto, and I'm taking money from him, I'm still going to attack him, if they're doing wrong. But we're seeing that if it offends advertisers in these mega corporations like Clear Channel, Viacom, Disney, Fox, MSNBC, NBC, CBC, if it offends them, we're not going to do this because we don't want them to lose that advertising dollar. In my opinion, and this is my humble opinion, no matter who it offends, we need to get the story, period, and let the public decide for themselves, hey, is this what we needed to know?
I agree entirely.
Take the sugar off. I think I think a lot of journalists, the big name, heavy hitter journalists, media personalities now, are a lot like politicians. You know, they started out, a lot of them started out with great ideals and great morals, and then they got big. It's like a lot of politicians. That's a lot of politicians when they're running. You know, when they're hungry and they're scrapping for a place in D.C., you know, we're thinking, oh, that's a great guy. And then they get in there and look what they do.
Exactly. I agree.
You get corrupted by the agenda that's going on around you. And that's what we have to expose.
And that's just
as the little guys.
Exactly. You know, we may be little. You know, we may be little in a lot of aspects, but yet it's up to us, the independent networks, the independent stations across the country, even those that we own. You know, we always strive on the fact that if you've got a story, stay to the facts, no matter what kind of a bitter pill it is, and let the public decide for themselves. Because like George Carlin said, it's going to take that critical thinking that mainstream media does not want you to have to decide who is going to serve us on Capitol Hill. Guys, I hate to sum this up, but we got to go. But I want to bring you all back in 2 weeks, and we're going to take up more about this. And hopefully, I'm going to invite Ed Till to the conversation too, because like me, he's been in this broadcast industry for a very, very long time. All right, everybody. It is time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned, because coming up right after NPR News, Ed Till will be with you all the way till 4 o'clock. Until Monday, 6 a.m., this is Bob Williams. Take care of yourselves.